This House is now in session. I wish to welcome back everyone. Hope you all had a restful holiday and that you all have come back with renewed vigor to do and conduct the people's business. Minutes of meetings held on Tuesday, December 17th, 2019, and Friday, December 20th, 2019, to be deferred.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that those minutes be so deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General. Petitions. Papers.
Mr. Speaker, at the...
No. Papers. Elena, Commander.
Trevor's here. Trevor's here.
What was it?
Yeah.
We need to
All
drop
right.
it.
All right, go on.
Good morning, sir. This is your responsibility. Commander Tilly.
Honorable member for St. Michael East.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded to lay Sanitation Service Authority Amendment Regulations 2019 before the Honorable House.
Government notices.
To give notice of a resolution to grant the sum of $15,414,834 from the Consolidated Fund and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates for 2019-2020 as shown in the supplementary estimates number 10, 2019-2020.
Private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first reading of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended.
Mr. Speaker, at the very last sitting, members may recall that we would have laid the Caribbean Community Movement of Skills National Amendment Bill of 2019. That bill was subsequently sent by the Chief Parliamentary Counsel to the Clerk of Parliament, a corrected copy of the bill. And I just wish to draw to members' attention that the relevant piece of legislation that we need to be looking at and to draw our attention to is the corrected copy, which carries the same date as the previous one, but it states corrected copy for ease of reference.
So noted, honourable member.
With that, Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to appoint the member for Christchurch South to serve as the chairman of committees for the next session.
Do they have to get up?
The question is that the honourable member for Christchurch South be appointed chairman of committees. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The honourable member is so appointed.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 10, sir. In the name of the Honorable Leader of the House, to move that the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee to consider the grant of sums of money for the service of this.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into Finance Committee.
The question is that the honourable speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into Standing Finance Committee. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This House is now in Standing Finance Committee.
Sure. Ain't gonna find it. Yeah. In the name of the Honorable Leader of the House, to move the passing of a resolution to grant the sum of $15,414,834 from the Consolidated Fund and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates 2019 to 2020 as shown in the supplementary estimates number 10, 2019 to 2020, which form the schedule to the resolution. What was the figure again? Head 32, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, in the amount of $3.4 million.
Yes, member.
Thank you, Chair. This morning I rise to present before the Honourable Chamber and the people of Barbados the supplementary for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade in the amount of $3.4 million. And we've presented this before the House today because part of our mandate as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade is to create a shift in terms of our focus in relation to how we conduct the foreign affairs diplomacy of Barbados. Part of that shift says that we must give more emphasis to the issue of trade. And this is important because of our national requirements for economic growth. If Barbados is going to be able to provide for its citizens the services that they expect, whether it's education, roads, sanitation, buses, whatever it is imperative that our enterprises are able to earn sufficient to be able to provide the tax revenues which government needs. And for that to happen, trade must occur. And therefore, we've been tasked to intensify this. And this $3.4 million is going to assist us in making that happen. The thing is, Mr. Chair, is that it comes at a time when the dynamics on the international stage that govern trade are changing. What we have is an issue where international relations and trade is now shifting towards unilateral and transactional policies. And what this does, it actually undermines the multilateral architecture that is important for small states. And I just want to take a moment or two to explain that for the benefit of the citizens of Barbados through you, Chair. In a multilateral setting, countries each have a vote and therefore get to participate equally in determining the rules that will govern how we work together, how we will trade, what are the standards, what are the policies that will govern how we interact together as countries, and especially in relation to trade. In a multilateral setting, you have consensus, and countries are encouraged to present what is beneficial to them, to form alliances, to get sufficient support in order to have the terms and conditions that are in the best interest of the citizens. Failure to engage that multilateral setting, failure to push through your agenda can often result in policies and rules that work against the best interests of your domestic citizens. I think sometimes Barbadians are not always aware of how much of our daily lives is actually being impacted by those decisions taken elsewhere. For example, I just participated in a WTO workshop and they were discussing domestic regulations governing the provision of services. What does that mean? It means that our doctors, our accountants, our lawyers, our architects and so on, that they have to be registered, they have to meet a certain level of performance, they have to have licenses, and they have guidelines as to how they can operate in their profession, in their space, also externally when they go to trade outside. even the ordinary citizen, when they go to do banking, you have rules and regulations by the people who seek to look after the financial system of the world, governing how you can get a bank account, what information you have to divulge, how often you have to report, and to give an account for what you're doing in terms of banking. When you go to the airport, the security measures that are put in place, all of those are governed by the multilateral architecture, coming up with policies, guidelines, and regulations that control how we actually conduct our business as individual citizens, how we actually live our lives. And therefore, the shift to the unilateral and transactional policies actually undermines the capacity of Barbados to have policy space in order to determine how we want our business conducted for the benefit of our citizens. And that is a very clear and present danger. So while we're trying to craft a place for trade, we have to be engaged at the multilateral level to determine how that trade will be conducted. And that is one of the reasons why Barbados is actively participating and playing a leading role in the upcoming UNCTAD 15, which will be taking place in October here in Barbados. Barbados will be one of the chairs of that particular conference, and it is one of the multilateral agencies that has a direct impact on trade with Barbados, in Barbados. So the whole purpose of the conference, therefore, and the reason for Barbados stepping up to the plate and offering to do that conference really is to act as a catalyst to refocus the organization and its work program towards the benefit of SIDS, the Small Island Development States, to make sure that up front, up center, are the concerns of small islands, and to ensure that we're able to engage this trading place with equity, that we are able to participate in a way that allows us to benefit and create value for our citizens. And therefore, the funds that we are requesting today is to help Barbados actually execute that particular conference and to put in place all the necessary elements that will allow us to be able to get UNCTAD to focus on what is of value to small island states. And what is it we're particularly interested in? One, we want to be able to promote the issue of climate change because it will have a profound impact on trade. It is going to change, for example, food security, because as climatic conditions change, it means it's going to impact on the way in which we grow crops, whether we're able to successfully conduct agriculture. We're going to have to change our farming practices. And all of this is going to call for more input from governments to assist farmers to make the transition. So climate change is one of the upfront things that we're going to be dealing with. Also, in relation to that, UNCTAD helps in terms of promoting diversification of the economies. And this is going to be important going forward because Barbados has to be able to find new economic sectors that it can engage in that will allow one for our young people who are studying and preparing themselves to pursue a career, that we are able to create space in which they can utilize those talents and build a life for themselves and grow the Barbados economy. It also assists in terms of integrating smaller economies into the world trading system through promoting entrepreneurship in small economies like ours. UNCTAD also helps with value chain development. And I would have spoken to this in some detail the last time I spoke in Parliament about the value chain development. And what UNCTAD has been able, along with the ITC in Geneva, to do with Barbados is, for example, to help us identify a space for ourselves in the coconut industry and to be able to move along that value chain. And the other area that would be of importance to Barbados is investment and creating a climate that is conducive to attracting investment into the region. So, Barbados has the honor of being the first small island state to actually host that conference and to be the chair for the next 4 years. So we're seizing this opportunity, Mr. Chair, to put on the world's agenda in that multilateral setting the issues that are important to us, because what has happened over the past few years, that our needs are being pushed aside. We've been pushing on the issue of being small, vulnerable states, asking for special and differential treatment. And what has been happening is that consistently the bigger countries have been pushing those aside and have not been engaging those things which are important to help us to be a part of the trading system and to be able to make a living for our people. So we see this as a prime opportunity that we need to utilize in order to advance our interests and also to give leadership on the interests of other small nations. As part of that strategy, our Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Motley, she has positioned Barbados to take an even greater step in leadership in relation to that UNCTAD conference by actually forming a global commission whose job is to develop a set of strategies and policies that will help to guide the discussions at UNCTAD and guide and influence the policies of other multilateral agencies to ensure that our needs are met. And this particular Global Commission is the Global Commission on Trade and Development Options 2020, Common Cause. And what we have been able to do, Prime Minister has established and asked the Professor Owen Arthur to head this particular effort, bringing his skills and his knowledge and experience to bear in pulling together some of the leading thinkers across the world who specialize in trade and development and who have a concern for small island development states, so that we can bring together the best minds and develop a set of policy options that we can actually present to the conference in October. And we believe that this will redound to the benefit of the nation as well as CARICOM. And the funds, approximately 2 million of that 3.4, will actually help with financing the Barbados National Organizing Committee and Secretariat. We have actually formed that and staffed it, and we now have to be able to pay for their services, etc., to ensure that they can do the work of coordinating with UNCTAD and the other countries that are a part of UNCTAD to develop a very successful conference. It also will pay for the work of the Global Commission, the Global Commissioners, bringing them together, the development of the position papers, and the development and presentation of the final document that will be submitted to UNCTAD 15 conference. Even as we speak now, Mr. Chair, we have UNCTAD technical team on the ground, and they're meeting with the National Organizing Committee, and a number of focal points are gathered together at this moment, actually working out the details of how the conference will be conducted and where the events will take place and all the arrangements that need to be in place in order to make UNCTAD 15 a success. And we believe that if we can conduct a truly successful conference in which we are able to position the needs of small nations and refocus UNCTAD on focusing on trade development, especially within a changing environment, that this will do much to provide much needed help, much needed support that we will need in order to take forward our trade. Now, at first, the two elements being dealt with under this head, Mr. Chairman, may seem to be divergent. That we're dealing with the UNCTAD conference on one hand, that is one discrete activity that will be taking place in October. And on the other, we want to be able to spend $1 million, just over $1 million on our missions. Some part of that money is to deal with an existing mission to be able to deal with some bills that need to be addressed. But the most important part of the money for missions is to be able to help us to establish a mission in Ghana. Mr. Chair, as we have examined where we are in terms of trade, Barbados has come to recognize the absolute importance of us pursuing South-South cooperation, especially in matters relating to trade. I would have shared with the Chamber some time back that trade, having developed out of a North-South relationship, has developed a set of patterns that are actually limiting to the development of trade for this region. All of the trade routes and transport require going north in order to go to another part of south. All of the manufacturing at one point kept all the primary goods, the raw materials, flowing from the south to the north to be turned into further processed products, and then all of those products then sold back to the south at a higher price, thus maintaining the inequality in terms of benefit from trade. Thus, the northern countries benefit significantly. They build beautiful civilizations. They create a great quality of life for their citizens. Meanwhile, the countries of the south, who earn less from trade, find themselves constantly scrambling for monies to be able to reform their education or to create proper health care, or to be able to offer to their students free university education, or to be able to take care of their elderly, or to have roads and sanitation, and to ensure that people have an opportunity to advance their lives. Therefore, the opening of a mission in Africa is really a continuation of our entire foreign trade policy, that not only do we create the policy space and put a case at UNCTAD, but in the practical world, on the ground, we are actively seeking to engage Ghana in a meaningful way, and we cannot engage Ghana from a distance. We have to be present. And why is that? They say repetition is the mother of learning. And I want to say this again for the benefit of the citizens of Barbados. A population of 280,000 people cannot provide sufficient capital to create new businesses for jobs, nor can they create sufficient gross domestic product to feed this nation and to take care of the dreams and the desires of our young people. 280,000 people working and paying taxes cannot provide that. That in order for Barbados to be able to provide for the future of its young people, it must engage in trade. Hence, we are intensifying our engagement, changing our strategy to be able to propel ourselves forward in such a way that we can grow the large businesses that we need. That is why any enterprise that is formed in Barbados today must not only have a plan that focuses on establishing themselves in the domestic space, they must focus with a plan that will eventually take them to export, whether it's into CARICOM, whether it's into Africa, whether it's into the EU, whether it's into Latin America. So the question that people may ask, why at this time are we considering Africa? Why Africa? Africa right now presents one of the most exciting economic opportunities that the world has to offer at this moment since the advent of China. And I'll explain why. The population of Africa at the moment is 1.2 billion people. It is going to double to 2.5 billion by 2030. What that means is that the population of Africa is going to be greater even than China, who will only reach 1.4 billion by 2030. That represents a huge market. So if the 1.2 billion that were in China a few years back could so transform world trade that China could come from the backwoods and now become the second largest economy in the world and is now having a major impact on trade dynamics, just imagine the emergence of an Africa doubling its population size to 2.5, moving from a GDP of $1.6 trillion to $2.2 trillion. And the only way for Africa to reach $2.2 trillion in trade requires that they are able to expand their businesses and expand their trading transactions, not only within Africa, but across the world. What that means is that Barbados and CARICOM must be in the midst of that. We must find ways to insert ourselves into the dynamics of the African trade possibilities so that we become part of value chains that have millions upon millions of consumers, so that we can begin to build businesses that have scale, that have quality products, that have the capacity to be internationally competitive. You can only do that if you have large populations to sell to, so that your unit costs become, comparatively speaking, competitive with other big giants in the world, including the EU and America and China. And therefore, it is absolutely vital that we engage Africa and engage it now. Now, Africa has a common problem with us. They too have to battle in the multilateral settings to create space for themselves, because like us, they are treated like second-class citizens in the world, as against the northern countries, the first world countries as they refer to themselves. And so they too have experienced inequality in trade. They have experienced unfairness in the conduct of contracts and the introduction of businesses into their space. They have had abuse as well. And Africa is now determining that it must take a hold of its own future by rising up and determining the dynamics of their own trade, which means they must form alliances and they must look for other partners to be able to diversify their markets so that they have options in this world. And this is one of the reasons why Africa has begun to look towards its diaspora. This is one of the reasons why we had the visits by the president of Ghana, the president of Kenya, coming across to send the personal signal: we are interested in our diaspora, we see a common future, and we want to engage with you. They have seen that we have common cause. And from our viewpoint, Ghana represents a good entry point for Barbados and Barbadian enterprises to be able to establish a mission that will be able to engage the entire African continent as we grow and as we develop. In Ghana, you have something like 30 million, a population of 30 million, and their GDP is 47.3 billion. But the interesting thing about Ghana is that Ghana has a large middle and upper class that is now growing. They're now growing their middle class. More and more people are engaging in trade and in business and finding their way into the middle class. And they have the beginning of a small upper class. And they're beginning to travel. They're beginning to buy goods. They're beginning to become consumers. And these represent wonderful opportunities for Barbadian products and services. So Ghana becomes our entry point. One of the things that Ghana is, what it currently makes its money on, that 47.3 billion, which they generate on an annual basis, they get that primarily from things like mining, from things like agriculture, and manufacturing is one of the things that they wish to do. Part of what their Minister of Foreign Trade shared with me when we were able to engage at an ACP meeting, he said, look, we have a very powerful strategy by which we want to be able to bring our rural people